Good day, and may the blessings of God be upon you. Welcome to First Natural, then Spiritual, Straight Talk, with your host, Brother T. Ingersoll. This show is designed to help everyone, believers and non-believers alike. Our goal is to approach subjects from a natural and then spiritual perspective. No subject is taboo. We will use and seek God and His Word as reference to find solutions and answers to everyday problems. Our first subject for this afternoon will be Christian music. We know that there are many styles to Christian music. For example, gospel, traditional, contemporary, Christian rock, Christian rap, and that's just to name a few. But is the message the same in the way it is presented and heard? Can it still save and deliver and bring people to Christ? On the natural side, music is universal. The majority of people may have a certain type of music they really love and listen to, which can cause a whole range of emotions and feelings. You can hear certain songs that can really make you happy. Then you might hear certain songs that bring back bad and painful memories and really make you sad. Other types of music may make you want to get up and groove and dance the night away. Other songs may make you just want to sing to the lyrics because you love them so much. But is the message? The message is what's most important. Do it change based on style, and do it speak to your spirit if you are a believer? This is a subject we'll be talking about today, and I want you to please feel free to share your comments. Let me know how you feel about it. We have a Facebook page available now, and you can log into that page, and I'll give you that address toward the end of the show, and you can let me know how you feel about it. Right now, let's get into Christian music. This is my own personal view and personal take on it. I'm the type of person, I never judge anybody. I have my own personal beliefs and things I deal with on a daily basis, so I don't condemn anybody. Whatever music someone decides to listen to, I believe that's their own personal choice, especially when it comes to Christian music. I know in today's society, a lot of churches will frown upon certain types of music. My background is Pentecostal in nature. I was born and raised in the Church of God in Christ. That's who I am. That's where I received my identity. That's where I received a salvation from. Just in case you didn't know, I am saved. Better get that right out front. But as far as me growing up, my father was a national evangelist of the Church of God in Christ. My mother was a church mother. I was adopted. And yet at the same time, they let us be exposed to all kinds of music. In the household was me, my brother, my adoptive sister, and her children. And they didn't hold back as far as music. Every day growing up, going to school, we always listened to Radio 910, which at that time played soft rock, is what you call. So we was exposed to a lot of the Beatles and Billy Joel, Elton John, in that genre. And actually the music that was played we really tend to like. Of course churches frown upon that, but that's what we was exposed to. I remember my brother hauling the organ that was being thrown away down the street into the house. We used to set up our own makeshift drums because we just didn't have a lot of money, so we would beat on chairs, find old guitars, put them together, and we was actually making music in the basement. Being exposed to that gave us a lot of ideas on how to incorporate that growing up in the church. Nowadays it's really frowned upon and looked upon. So the influence, the musical influence we had back then, we was exposed in the gospel realm to James Cleveland, Shirley Caesar, Walter Hawkins was one of our favorites. And even at that time they was considered radical. Today's artists such as Kirk Franklin, Mary Mary, they are considered even radical because the exposure today, they have managed to cross over into mainstream. So their music is being heard on all stations, not just gospel. They are heard on R&B and other stations across the nation, which brings a lot of controversy. Say, for example, Kirk Franklin loves to sample certain types of R&B music, and you can hear it in the way it is presented. Well, a lot of churches really have a problem with this. But my take on it is the message behind the music and the intent. Where is your intent? Where is your heart? And that's where we really want to get at, to the heart of the matter. What may be good for me may not necessarily be good for you. That doesn't mean we're supposed to condemn people. That doesn't mean we're supposed to send them to hell, because we are in no position to do that. So what might work for me may not necessarily work for you in your spirit. Does that make it wrong? In my opinion, no. But you have a lot of people, especially when we go through each generation, because nothing is new under the sun. So in my generation, when Walter Hawkins then was considered radical, we moving into a new generation where now it's Kirk Franklin and other artists, Ty Tribbett, for example, Deitrick Haddon. They're the ones that's considered radical. But if you look and listen to their music and really get to the lyrics and the heart of the matter and see how it draws people, especially young people, you may want to think twice about saying their music is bad and their music is not reaching folks the way it should. You might want to take a second look on that. What I have here, what I would like to read to you, is an article. And this article is by Jack Wellman. He's a Christian author, freelance writer, and pastor at the Melvine Brethren Church in Melvine, Kansas. Jack has attended Southern California Seminary. His books are inexpensive paperbacks that are theological in nature, teaching children the gospel and how to raise godly children. Do babies go to heaven? Why does God allow suffering among others? He has written 211 articles on what Christians want to know. So I just want to kind of give you a little background. And this is what he has to say about Christian music. And the title of the article is, What Does the Bible Say About Music? What should we listen to? Some like rock and roll, others like traditional church hymns. Still others choose more contemporary Christian worship songs. While some choose the near heavy metal Christian music, what does the Bible say about a believer's choice of Christian music and secular music? Are there some principles and guidelines a believer can follow? Or are there liberties or grace that allows Christians to listen to what they like? And that's his formal introduction. His opinion, and this is the second paragraph, to each his own. I had a former pastor of a traditional and very conservative Southern Baptist church that loved contemporary Christian rock music to worship with. He also loved Molly Hatchet. A heavy dose of rock and roll. Some church members criticized him for his love of rock and roll music. Were they right, though? And he went on to say, he likes to listen to everything and anything up to a point. He chooses carefully what the lyrics have to say. If the lyrics or the words of a song are full of sinful meanings and sing about things that are clearly wrong, thus glorify in the Bible, then he do not listen to them. Saying this, he loves Led Zeppelin, Beethoven's Fifth, just a wide range of music. But then he goes on to say everything is permissible. Well, what does that mean? Paul had difficulties with the church at Corinth. They were too quick to judge others on the things where grace should have abounded. Instead of church members settling things between themselves in a Christian manner or bringing the matter before the church, they were out suing one another in court. They were getting into fierce argument over things which should have never been brought to a judge. The witness of Christ was hurt over such quarreling. Paul was upset with the church at Corinth and said, "If any of you have a dispute with one another, dare he take it before the ungodly for judgment instead of before the saints. Do you not know that the saints will judge the world? And if you are judged the world, you are not competent to judge trivial cases." And that's 1 Corinthians the 6th chapter, the 1st through the 2nd verse. Instead of settling these issues with one another, one brother goes to law against another, and this in front of unbelievers. And that's in 1 Corinthians the 6th chapter and the 6th verse. Paul was saying that everything was permissible for him, and yet not everything was beneficial. 1 Corinthians 6:12. In this context was sexual immorality. In this case, they were talking about foods that was to be eaten, and saying that grace should abound. Some were judging others for the things that were not sent to them. Some was eating meats that was left over from sacrifice to idols. That was okay. For others, it was an offensive thing. Paul was not happy about such judgment of others over simply what they ate. He told the church at Rome to accept the one whose faith is weak without quarreling over disputed matters. One person's faith allows him to eat anything, but in another whose faith is weak, eat only vegetables. The one who eats everything must not treat contempt with the one who does not, and the one who does not eat everything must not judge the one who does. I know we're talking about food, but the point of the matter here is we're talking about everything is permissible. So to their own master, servants stand or fall, and they will stand, for the Lord is able to make them stand. That's Romans the 14th chapter, the 1st through the 4th verse. So as we go into this, we are to avoid stumbling blocks. In other words, we can be a hindrance to believers trying to impose what we think is right on them. The same principles should apply to believers who listen to Christian or secular music. If someone loves only the old hymns and detests the newer stuff like Christian rock or Christian rap, they should not try to impose their beliefs, their personal preference, upon others who like it. They may go more toward traditional gospel. They may lean toward more Christian contemporary or modern worship music. We should not judge those who like the more traditional Christian hymns or secular music. The key here, as long as the lyrics now do not glorify sin, there should be no cause for offense from either party. There must be room for grace. We do know what grace is. Well, if we don't, as Paul said, for none of us lives for ourselves alone, and none of us dies for ourselves alone. If we live for the Lord, and if we die for the Lord. So whether we live or die, we belong to the Lord. Romans the 14th chapter, the 7th through the 8th verse. He says, "Why do you judge your brother or sister? Or why do you treat them in contempt? For we all shall stand before God's judgment seat." Romans the 14th chapter and the 10th verse. So Paul concludes, so then each of us is given an account ourselves to God. Therefore let us stop passing judgment on one another. Instead, make up your mind not to put any stumbling block or obstacle in the way of our brother or sister. Romans the 14th chapter, the 12th through the 13th verse. For example, and this is a good example you gave. If we're going to travel with a Christian brother or a Christian sister who prefers listening to any type of Christian music, whether it's traditional or gospel, we shouldn't impose what we like upon them just because we want to. In other words, if I'm an R&B lover or listen to secular music, I should at least have enough respect and decency for the person that's riding along with me not to impose my will upon them. We can make that a stumbling block. We can be hindrance to others who is really trying to seek salvation, to try to live a saved life simply because of what we think is right. That's not showing love, that's not showing patience, and that's not showing understanding. In all things we supposed to give charity, meaning love. And that's a real good principle to follow. Because now we can cause people to turn away simply because we feel they're not doing right or not listening to what we think is right. I always had a problem with that, especially growing up and now in the church, where music plays such a big part and a big influence on people, saved and unsaved. You can drive down the street, an unbeliever can drive down the street and hear the music being played in the church. That might prompt him to stop, turn, and see what all the commotion is about. The music is sounding good to his ears, which would prompt him to come in and see what's going on. In the midst of that music, it might make him to stay, in which case he could stay and hear the word of God, which may actually quicken his heart and maybe want to give his life over to him. Music has always been a big part. If you go back in Bible history, I don't know if you want to quote me on this, but this is, and I should give you some reference to back this up, but the number one angel was a worshiper. In other words, he was in charge of the music, and we believe that to be Satan, of course. And that was the main reason why he was cast out of heaven, is because he wanted to be greater than God. But he was in charge of the worship, of the music. So you can say Satan really knows how to spin this world around, because everybody relates to music some form, some fashion. It don't matter what culture you come from, what background you come from. When you hear music, it does something to you. It does something on the inside, which is what I said at the beginning of the broadcast, bringing in all types of range of emotions, sad, happy. And that's why the influence in the church is so big, because actually that's where it started. So you don't want to be a stumbling block, especially to non-believers, because you imposing your own will upon them. What do I have to say about today's contemporary artists? I actually like them. I like the music, some of the music of Kirk Franklin. I like some of the music of Mary Mary. The lyrics and the intent, that's where you draw the line. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to draw people, bring them to Christ, to turn their lives around? Or are you in it for other reasons? Some artists now are into Christian music simply because it's an easier avenue than, say, secular. So they looking for that quick buck. This is going on. So your heart, where your heart is, and trust me, God knows where you're at and what you're trying to do. So you're really not fooling anybody but yourself if your heart is not right. And you in it for the wrong reasons. You in it to make a buck. You in it to get fame. You in it to be well known and popular. This is people's lives, salvations that's at stake here. So you can't try to fool anybody, because eventually you're going to bring damnation to yourself. There's an example in the Bible that I wanted to use also, how music can really play such a influence, how music is so powerful. This is in regards to King Saul and David. If you go to 1 Samuel, the 16th chapter, and we're going to start right around we'll start around the 20th verse. And I'm reading from the New King James Amplified version. And Jesse took an ass laden with bread and a bottle of wine and a kid, and sent them by David and his son unto Saul. And David came to Saul and stood before him, and he loved him greatly, and became his armor-bearer. And Saul sent to Jesse, saying, Let David, I pray thee, stand before me, for he hath found favor in my sight. And it came to pass, when the evil spirit from God was upon Saul, then David took a harp, and played it with his hand. So Saul was refreshed, and was well, and the evil spirit departed from him. So in that particular verse, an evil spirit had came upon Saul. Saul was vexed. Saul was troubled. Sent for David. David played the music to soothe Saul's soul. Played the music so well that the evil spirit was suppressed down in him. That's how music can calm. That's how music can soothe. That's how music can take what's inside of you, negative or positive. Music is always, I believe, is going to play a big part in our church. It plays a big part in our worship. And it's the message that's behind the music. That is what's most important. Your intent. Where your heart is. That's my opinion, and I've read the article on Christian music, and I want to know exactly how you feel about it. Where do you stand as far as music in the church? What should be played? What should not be played? I'm very, very curious, because it's the range and the different types that are out there, especially today, what type of influence it has on the world at large, and how can it save, or how can it even turn a non-believer and make him want to give his life to Christ. And you can tell when I see it, hear it in certain churches, certain songs you may think is Christian, but it may actually take you back to the day you was rocking in the club. You're not necessarily thinking about Christ, but that's because you're listening to the beat. And it may draw you back to when you used to really get down on the dance floor. They may not necessarily be right, though. When it all comes down to it, it's you that has to give an account. It's you that are seeking salvation if you want to receive it. And it's ultimately between you and God. So really take that into consideration. Don't force your beliefs on anybody else. You can share with them, but don't condemn them without first checking and examining yourself first. We hope and trust that we said something to broaden your mind and your way of thinking. Ultimately, we want to bring non-believers in a personal relationship with Christ. And if you already have one, we want you to be stronger and grow in Him. Join us again to finish our discussion about Christian music, and tune in again and log on to our webpage. I can be found at terry.ingersoll46 at Facebook. The page is First Natural, then Spiritual, Straight Talk. This is Brother Terry Ingersoll saying to all my Straight Talk listeners, thank you for listening, May God continue to bless you, and peace be unto you.